Good morning and welcome to this week's episode of the Sports Curious Podcast. It's our Wednesday Wisdom edition where we are talking about college basketball. The road to March Madness start on the 4th. We'll start on the 4th, but we are here. This is where we begin. So you can get bracket ready right now. Join the conversation around the world of sports. And here to join us to talk about college basketball is our college basketball expert, because it's certainly not me, Scott. Scott, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me on to talk college basketball. March Madness is everyone's favorite time of year. Those 3-4 weeks in March are the best 3 weeks in college basketball, but we have to start somewhere, and we're starting here.
So let's recap and get everybody on the same page. Women's basketball last year, college basketball, and WNBA too, had a phenomenal season. We had Caitlin Clark, we had Angel Reese, we had all these phenomenal players, Juju Watkins, who were playing last year. Give us a recap of what happened last year on men's and women's side. But the women definitely dominated in terms of headlines last season.
Yeah, we'll start with the women. As you mentioned, there was a lot of big names, like Caitlin Clark and Angel Reese, who drew record attendance, record viewership, but they have moved on to the WNBA and they also brought record viewership and attendance there as well. So women's college basketball is looking for new stars. They have quite a few big names coming back based on the WNBA draft, because you have to stay at least 3 years. So there's a lot of younger players coming up that were big names. Like you mentioned, Juju Watkins, she's back. So the women's college game is in a great spot. South Carolina is looking to defend their title. They're coming off an undefeated season, looking to go back-to-back. Dawn Staley's kind of built a dynasty down there in Columbia, South Carolina, and it doesn't look like it's slowing down anytime soon.
Yeah, I mean, Dawn Staley, I actually bought a pair of shoes off of Dawn Staley's Instagram. Like, not off her Instagram, but she was wearing this pair of Jordans. And I was like, these are fantastic. I need to go buy a pair. Thank you, Dawn Staley. And so thank you, Dawn Staley, for your fashion sense.
Yeah, her shoe game is just as elite as her coaching abilities. So
that is an understatement.
Yeah.
And I got them, and all my college students are like, whoa, where did you get those shoes? I was like, oh, I don't know. I got them online. Like, I saw Dawn Staley wearing them. I'm like, I'm really not that cool. I just need you to know that I just really like the way they looked.
You got street cred with your students.
Yeah. It doesn't happen very often.
Take what you can get.
By the way, you still sound like you're sick.
It's been ever since we went on vacation. It's been getting sick, and the weather variation in Las Vegas is crazy. So being 80 degrees one day, and then in the morning it's 40 degrees, and then back up to 80. So it doesn't help.
It doesn't help. Well,
no, it does not.
Hopefully next week when we get back on, you'll be like in tip-top shape.
That's the plan. Definitely.
But you know what? This is a very good quality content for you, because you're so good at all of these things. So we have these women who've done really well. We've had the men. We have UConn and Dan Hurley. So they're coming back as well on the men's side.
Looking to go. We also have a mini dynasty on the men's side as well with the UConn Huskies, like you said. They're back-to-back champions. They kind of just dominated everyone last March. It wasn't really even fair. Dan Hurley's looking for a three-peat, which has only been done once by UCLA. And they actually won 7 straight in a row. Dan Hurley's got a lot to live up to. He had a lot of players leave for the NBA, so he's reloading. But I'm sure by the time we get to March, he'll be locked in, wearing his lucky underwear and drinking his weird coffees.
As you do. Now, this just came into my mind. We had a big change in men's college basketball. Tony Bennett, right, who was the head coach of Virginia, longtime head coach of Virginia.
Yes.
He resigned because he basically said, this name, image, likeness stuff is too much. Am I gathering that correct?
Yes. I mean, we've seen this kind of take place across college football. We've seen a lot of coaches move on or take different positions. Bennett left right before the season. I think it was kind of known that he was going to leave, but he didn't want someone else coming in to coach his team. He wanted to hand it off to one of his assistants. So he kind of waited till the last second, maybe it was a week or two before the season, I think, and stepped down, basically citing like NIL and transfer portal. It's the Wild West. It's kind of impossible for coaches to, get a sense of security with who they have on their team. because it can change at an instant. Being an old school guy, he had a national championship. He's good. His career's set. He decided to leave, and I mean, it's kind of honorable what he did. He just basically passed off to his assistants, knowing that they would get the job, and then that way, players they had, they wouldn't leave.
That's really interesting. Well, we're seeing in college football, you're seeing teams adding a manager, essentially, general manager type
Yes.
role to handle some of this name, image, likeness stuff because it's become so much, and the changeover in athletes has been pretty significant.
Yes, and we have a lot of GM type positions in college basketball now. The NBA insider, Adrian Wojnarowski, quit his job as an NBA insider to go back to his alma mater to be basically the GM of the college to ensure that, everything's running right. So it's becoming a prestigious position for people to have. And it's not an easy one because coaches can't possibly deal with everything going on outside of basketball and coach basketball. So it's becoming a very prominent position.
Yeah, it's really interesting to see. It's sort of this flux, and there's a lot of stuff happening behind the scenes on name, image, likeness but I mean, you read all these articles from old school coaches who are like, this is basically a dumpster fire, and they need to put some structure in around it because it's just that name, image, likeness, transfer portal, like all that together. It's all been a hot mess, and somebody needs to put it together. And, unfortunately, it may have been rolled out too late or too soon or whatever you want to say. But if it didn't roll out, it was never going to roll out. It was never going to be perfect.
Yeah, unfortunately, I think NCAA's done a pretty terrible job with it. They were late rolling it out, but then really didn't have a plan when they rolled it out. And they've not been able to reel it back in with no real plan. So hopefully they can get it together soon and kind of fix maybe what's broken in college sports. I mean, kids should be able to transfer if they need to or want to, but it's gotten a little excessive.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Well, it's just a whole different thing. Now, speaking of name, image, likeness, as we were reviewing the notes before this, you were talking through this Players Era Festival, which is happening Thanksgiving week in Las Vegas. And that is really the first name, image, likeness, first tournament that players are going to get paid to show up. Now, there's a lot of basketball tournaments over Thanksgiving. We have the Maui Invitational, which has been around forever. But this one will be some big teams, and they're going to be paid to show up, which has never happened before.
Yeah, it's the first tournament to actually take advantage of NIL and offer NIL as incentive for teams to come play. A lot of these tournaments, like the Maui Classic, and there's so many other tournaments during the month of November. It's more about the prestigious name and playing in the tournament and going to travel and be with your team. But the Players Era tournament in Las Vegas has basically said, we're going to pay you to show up and contribute to your NIL. And there's 8 teams coming in this year. There's some pretty big names like number 2 Alabama, number 4 Houston. We've got Notre Dame, so we should be excited about that. But yeah, basically come play. We'll pay you to show up. There's more than $1 million per team, and then total $9 million for the teams, all 8 teams showing up.
That's pretty awesome. Now, you see some of these college basketball players, and I want to talk a little bit about the players themselves, because I think those are things we watch as individuals. We want to get behind someone like Caitlin Clark, right? Now let's start on the women's side. Juju Watkins is from USC. She's just only a sophomore. She was a huge name last season, maintains to be a big name this season. We have Paige Bueckers, who's a redshirt senior at UConn. We have Hannah Hidalgo from Notre Dame. We have some phenomenal, Kiki Rice from UCLA, who's a junior. We have some phenomenal players that are still here from last season. What can we expect? What should we watch for? Talk to me a little bit about these ladies so we can get on board and start buying the jerseys and then wearing the t-shirts.
Yeah, there's, like I said, big names returning just basically because the WNBA draft rules doesn't allow them to leave. So they're able to build their brands over the 3 years that they're required to stay. And Juju Watkins, the USC, really burst on the scene last year as a freshman. And her sophomore campaign is obviously going to be, the hype is going to be pretty crazy. It's going to be probably Caitlin Clark, Angel Reese type levels. And that's great for her and college basketball. Paige Bueckers, I feel like she was the trailblazer in all this for women's basketball. but unfortunately, injuries have led her to stay in college at UConn. She's got a lot of NIL deals, which makes it a lot easier for her. She's had a lot of injuries, and people forget how good she really was. And she's looking to prove it this year as a senior, which is pretty unheard of. There's a lot of big names that are coming back that the women's game's I think we spoke about it last year quite a bit. The women's game is typically in a better position than men's just because they're able to build brands more.
Yeah. I remember when we did this podcast for March Madness last year, and I think you asked me, like, could I name anybody on the men's side? And my answer was no. I mean, I watched college basketball, but I usually watch it just like a lot of people in passing as it's on TV and I'm coming and going. But I mean, I could name you 5 women's players. And so it's really great to see that happening. And for those of you who are kind of wondering, these WNBA draft rules, they're very different. The NBA, essentially, you have to be 1 year out of high school. And that's essentially the window, right? And then for the WNBA, players have to be at least 22 years old during the draft year and have either completed their college eligibility, received a bachelor's degree, or been at least 4 years removed from high school graduation. So like you said, that allows them a chance to build their brand because they're not just leaving, they're not just coming for a year. We'll just look at Bronny James, right? He came in for a year to USC just to head to the WNBA or just the NBA. And he's now in the G League, which is probably where he should be. He played his history-making game and now is in the G League where he's getting a chance to grow and develop because he didn't even play hardly during that 1 year he was out of high school. And so it's interesting to see how that is it's allowed these ladies to really create this firestorm. And it's neat because now people are getting to, I think that's what people want, right? As fans, we want to have someone we can get behind. We don't want to just get invested in someone and they leave. And so it's neat to see how this is happening.
Absolutely. And I'm sure the ratings are going to show that. It's going to back up what we're saying, that people are more interested when you can see someone progress and relate to them and build a brand for multiple years. And I think the men's side has struggled with that. Like you said, Charles Barkley last year was very vocal that he didn't really even care about the men's tournament. He had no clue who anyone was. And UConn kind of dominating that side on the men's didn't really help either. I believe the stats for the women's final game blew the men's final game out of the waters as ratings. So it probably will this year as well, but it'll be a fun thing to watch throughout the season, give people something to look forward to throughout the dog days of November, December, and January in college basketball.
Absolutely. Now, I do have a quick question before we dive into the men's side. This unrivaled basketball league that is happening, it's been started by 2 WNBA players. That is, I think, allegedly going to start around January-ish. But that's only for professional players. That's not something a college player. I mean, I know the seasons overlap, so it's not a logical question necessarily, but it's not something that's just for professional players, right?
Correct. So the Unrivaled, it's going to start, I think, mid-January. And I just read that originally they only had 30 players slotted to play. Is it the 3-on-3? But they just increased it to 36. Based on demand. So it's an opportunity for the WNBA players to not have to go play overseas, and encounter something like that Brittany Griner had to do, which in the past, all of them went overseas and made a ton of money in the off season, but that's a lot of travel. It's a lot of wear on the body. So this one will be in the United States. I believe it's all taking place in Miami.
Okay.
But it'll give everyone an opportunity to play, and they've increased it already before it even started, the amount of teams and players. So it'll be something cool to see.
That actually gives me chills. Like that's to me is so exciting to see the growth of this and give us another opportunity to cheer these ladies on in a different form of basketball, 3-on-3. And like you said, this was created by one of the co-founders is Brianna Stewart from the New York Liberty, who just won. And so she's looking for opportunities. She has a family. She doesn't want to travel overseas.
No,
and so
absolutely.
It's cool to see that. Okay, that was my question I was curious about. Now, on the men's basketball side, we have a once-in-a-generation talent. Now, we had Victor Wembanyama, who came through the NBA draft, I think was that 2 years ago? And he was, the massive, over 7 foot tall French player who is still playing. He plays for the Spurs. And am I right?
Yes. Good job.
Scared myself for just a second. I started questioning my life. after I said that. But this year we have Cooper Flagg, who was just a freshman at Duke. And everybody, we've talked about it in our NBA season highlight podcast, so I don't want to belabor it, but Cooper Flagg is who everybody wants on their team next year if you're an NBA team.
Yes, he is. And he's the player that men's college basketball has been searching for a few years. The hype is unreal. Over the summer with Team USA basketball, when they were preparing for the Olympics, he was scrimmaging with them. And a lot of those guys were saying that he's right there on a level with them, the top players of the NBA already. 7-foot tall player, freshman out of Maine, I think. So it's super random state that you don't hear much about as far as college basketball goes. He ended up transferring to high school in Florida to get more competition. And he's the first male to ever sign a deal with Gatorade.
As a college student, right?
As a college student. There's a few women basketball players. I think Juju and Paige are on the Gatorade roster, but he's the first male college basketball player. So it's the person that college basketball's been looking for to get people to tune in, that main event player.
Right.
And he's going to Duke, which you either hate Duke or you love Duke. You're going to tune in either way. If you hate them, you tune in to hopefully see them lose. So he's going to bring a lot of ratings and a lot of excitement to the men's game that they've desperately been reaching for.
But it's really interesting. So, you go back to this whole branding, and my brain is marketing, but it's like you think about the branding, that he's not going to have a chance to build his brand before he gets to this really saturated NBA market with great players. And he's going to probably end up with a team that's not so good, because that's how the drafts work and how they're meant to work. And so it's like he doesn't have a chance to build that brand, but everybody's pushing him, right? You're going to get out of this first year and then go play in the NBA. And so that's kind of interesting. I mean, obviously that's the whole goal for these athletes, right? Is to get to where they can make some, I'd say big money, but they can do that now. But, it's fascinating to look at it from that perspective.
And to be good enough to live up to the hype is also, the challenge. How do you handle being at Duke, being everyone's, all eyes on you at Duke as, this blue chip French basketball team. So it'll be exciting. Hopefully he does well and helps the men's game grow a little bit to somewhat equal the women's.
Yeah, it'd be great to have have a choice to have phenomenal games on all the time. Now let's talk really quickly as we get ready to wrap up about the impact of conference realignment. We talked a lot about this in the beginning of football season, because we've had all these teams shift conferences, which people may or may not realize this impacts everyone from football to basketball to track to hockey, whatever it is. These teams are now having to travel, but football travels once a week and has a game once a week. Basketball can have 2-3 games a week. And so these players are now having to travel from West Coast to East Coast, and you're going across 3 or 4 time zones. So talk to me just a little bit about the impact of this conference realignment for basketball.
It's going to be huge with these teams traveling multiple time zones, multiple times a week. I mean, predictably, I think all the fans realized that it was going to be terrible for these student athletes to do. I don't know if, for whatever reason, the administrators that decide to make these deals thought about it, honestly, how much it's going to impact. In college football, we've seen teams traveling across 2 to 3 time zones in the Big Ten. The record's pretty terrible. I think it's at like a 30% win rate, and they're only traveling once a week. So now you have, I pulled up a random schedule. I pulled up USC basketball schedule because they're going to have to travel super far. And I picked a few random games just to give you an example of kind of the travel they're going to have to go through. So on January 8th, they play at Indiana. And then January 11th, so the 8th is a Wednesday. Then on the 11th, they have to play Illinois at 9 a.m. local time. So in that case, do you fly all the way home, back to LA, and then back to Illinois? Most likely not.
And it's a 7 a.m. game, their time zone, which no one's prepared for a 7 a.m. game.
No, I mean, Pac-12 games were typically mid-afternoon or late night. So how do you prepare your team to get up at 7 a.m. and be ready to go on the road in a hostile environment? And then obviously you're probably not flying back. So you're on the road for 4 to 5 days trying to do classwork, and just be a human
Practice.
being.
It's really interesting from my perspective as a adjunct college professor.
Mhm.
I watch these, our football players, they tend to have a game Thursday, Friday, Saturday, somewhere in that window.
Yes.
So they're pretty much have a standard operating. They get there Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. They're always in class when they can be. I'm always impressed by that. But I look at the basketball split because I obviously get schedules sent to me for our students when they travel. And the amount of travel that comes from basketball and volleyball and tennis, it's mind-blowing to me that they still even have a chance to be a student. I mean, I look at this and go, how are you supposed to learn from PowerPoint notes that I put up? I mean, we're not
Yes.
recording that I know of. No one's really recording lectures. You're
Mhm.
relying on your group mates where they're having to then, they're saying, well, I'm trying to get this done to my group, but I can't be there for this. So I'm doing my best to get this done and I'm trying to get this done. And they're balancing all this. And one of my former students who is a volleyball player, she's balancing volleyball. She's on
Mhm.
scholarship, so she has to keep great grades. She's doing name,
Yes.
image, likeness stuff. She's trying to get work experience on top of all of that. And so you're looking at how does that all even, it blows my mind. But I mean, it really comes down to money, right? I mean, these athletes are making the
Unfortunately,
school
yeah,
money and they're not unfortunately getting this. They're all carrying a lot of stress and anxiety to try to make all of it happen. I can tell you that much.
as an 18-year-old, 19-year-old on top of that.
Yeah.
And just think about the school you're at. That's a lot of travel, and it's not as luxurious as probably a big program.
No, and
So
we're in the middle.
traveling to smaller airports and weird flight times, yeah, it's got a lot to handle.
Yeah.
It'll be interesting to look back on this era maybe 10, 20 years from now and kind of see the impact it had.
Yeah. It's really interesting. So anyways, I'll get off my soapbox now. Um, is there anything else you want to cover before we rock and roll out of here?
There's just one new face and a new place I wanted to go
Please.
over in case people kind of missed out. So John Calipari, longtime head coach at Kentucky, had quite a few early tournament exits, and the relationship pretty much ran its course to Kentucky. He sent a ton of players to the NBA, had a massive recruiting program there, but it just kind of, and Arkansas threw some huge money at him. So he went from Kentucky to Arkansas in the offseason, and he's trying to build what he did at Kentucky at Arkansas for a lot of money.
And if you are a Tyson chicken buyer, you can thank, or excuse me, I should say Arkansas can thank you for helping pay the bill to bring John over because the CEO of Tyson Foods was really the key player in making that connection happen.
Yes, he was the money man. He's got the money to do it, and he made it happen. So Razorback fans are likely eating as much Tyson chicken as they can to make sure that
That's fantastic. And if you don't want to be a Razorback fan, then you probably should go buy somebody else's chicken.
absolutely. And it's interesting that he basically, when he came over for all this money, I don't think he had any players on his roster because of transfer portal and things like that. So he's basically throwing together a team in a few months. So this will be quite the social experiment on transfer portal as well.
Interesting. That's really interesting. We'll keep an eye on Arkansas there. Okay,
Yes.
well, obviously basketball started on the 4th, which was Monday, and then the first 4 games in March Madness are Tuesday, March 18th. So once again, right around St. Patrick's Day, and the season wraps around the 7th of April for men's and
Yep.
women's. So hang in there. It's going to be a wild ride. And of course, questions, concerns, all those things, you know where to find us on social. Make sure to DM us, and of course at lastnightsgame.com. Thanks, Scott, for being here.
Thank you.